Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week we're going to be talking about pruners, and we'd like to thank English actor Andy Pandini for liking and sharing the podcast. Pruning plants and shrubs into pleasing shapes dates back to ancient Rome, and Pliny the Elder wrote about the first topiary gardens in Rome in his natural history book. Pliny the Younger, his nephew, described shrubs being shaped into figures of animals, and he said that his uncle Pliny didn't like bonsai trees because he didn't think trees should be stunted in their growth. Pruners for removing stems and branches come in two styles. You have bypass and anvil. With the bypass pruners, these are going to have a curved upper sharpened blade that passes by a thicker unsharpened blade or a hook, and they're working like scissors. So most of these are going to have a spring that helps open the jaws after every cut. With anvil pruners, this has an upper sharpened blade that comes down into the center of an unsharpened lower jaw, and they call that an anvil, after the wide block that blacksmiths work heated metal on. And you know, anvils were used since ancient times in Greece and Egypt.
Wow.
And also in Roadrunner cartoons. Bypass pruners should be used on healthy plants and stems that are alive. A bypass pruner isn't going to crush the stem, it's going to make a very clean cut. And when you're positioning your pruner on a stem, you want to get it deep into the jaw for better leverage, and keep the bottom of the unsharpened blade or the hook on the side of the stem that's going to be trimmed away. And you want that top bypass blade toward the plant. So where that cutting edge meets the hook or the bottom part, there can be a little bit of damage on the hook side.
Okay.
And so you want that on the side that's being cut off. So the bypass pruner is primarily used for live plants and stems because it can get jammed on dead branches and twigs.
Bummer.
Anvil pruners cut and crush stems and branches, and they're going to work best for dead branches. So that crushing action against that lower anvil is going to break up and explode dead fibers. And that crushing action doesn't work well.
I'm kind of excited about that.
But what's interesting is, so an anvil pruner, it doesn't work that well on live stems because you crush it and do damage to it, which can cause infection. And the Seattle Rose Society says that pruning rose stems with an anvil pruner can cause infection. Small pruners that you use with one hand are usually called pruners or hand shears or secateurs. And that sounds better if you're English. Long-handled pruners that you hold with two hands are called loppers. And you want to look at the recommended diameter for the cutting size. Most of the small pruners are 1/2 inch to 3/4, although some go up to 1 inch. And loppers are usually going to be 1.5 inches to 2 inches. And then for branches that are larger than that, you'd want to use a pruning saw. If you have hand weakness, arthritis, or carpal tunnel, a ratcheting pruner is going to make it easy to cut through branches. So the ratchet allows you to squeeze the handle and lock the blade so you can open the handle again, squeeze it again, slowly working that blade through a branch. And it's going to allow you to increase the force that you're applying to it so it's easier on your hands. And the ratchet pruners are going to come in that anvil style. You can get cushioned or ergonomically shaped handles for more comfort, and a style with rotating handles actually allows your fingers to roll over the handle, reducing the stress on your fingers and wrists. And these are rated very high for comfort.
Well, you should definitely pick them up in the store, squeeze them, see how they feel in your hand.
Yeah, and it's such a repetitive motion that you definitely want something comfortable. And if you're left-handed, you can get left-hand pruners. So the blades are reversed and the grip's designed to be held in the left hand. Most pruners have a spring or coiled metal between the handles to push the blades apart after cutting through the stems. And you want one that's tightly attached to the handles and it's forcing the handles apart strongly. The pruners without springs are usually longer bladed and work like traditional scissors. When you're shopping for pruners, the pruners that can be taken apart are going to be much easier to clean and sharpen. If you get the blades with non-stick coatings on them, they're much easier to keep clean and it prevents sap from gumming up the blades. It also resists rust. Hardened carbon steel blades are going to last longer and they're easier to sharpen. And if you get pruners with locking handles, it's going to help protect the blades and then it's safer to store.
So you don't cut off your hand?
Right, or a finger. For more cutting power, some loppers have
Who came up
offset...
with that name? Lopper.
That's a great name. So some of these loppers, they're going to have offset pivot points for the jaws. Some are going to have gears on the jaws. It's going to give you more leverage. Or you can get compound lever designs, and it's going to give you 2 or 3 times more cutting power. With these large two-handled loppers, you never want to cut through wire or metal because it's going to chip the jaws, and then it's going to damage the limbs that you're cutting through.
So, branch limbs, not like people limbs?
All right, unless you're...
Dexter?
Hedge shears are like large scissors with long handles, and you're going to be using 2 hands, and both blades are sharpened on the outside edge. They're going to make long, straight cuts, and you only want to ever sharpen the outside bevel, not the flat side of these. You've got straight blades, which are the most common. You can also get wavy blades, and this is going to help grip branches so they don't slide along that blade, but they're going to be a little more difficult to sharpen. And you can get offset pivot points and geared hinges for more cutting power, like the loppers. Tree pruners have a long pole, usually 6 to 16 feet long, with a tree pruning saw and a pruner that you control with a pull cord on the end of this. And most of these pole pruners are going to cut 1 to 1.5 inch branches, but take a look at the label. And the pruner has a hook shape that's going to lock onto a branch, and then the cutting blade is going to be coming up from below with this style. And they usually have a compound pulley system to amplify the leverage, so it's going to make it much easier to cut through these branches. And the first pulley systems, they were used in around 1500 BC to lift water out of wells. The longest pole saw I saw was from ATSS, and it has a 33-foot reach. There's 6 poles that you can attach to this.
Wow.
Can you imagine using something
No.
33 feet away? So with these tree pruners, you can also get corded and cordless, and most have about a 10-foot reach, and they use a chainsaw blade for cutting. Works has an interesting one, so it's WORX. They have a pole saw chainsaw combo pruner, so you can remove the chainsaw from the pole and use it handheld. And when I spoke to Works about it, they said that whenever you're using this type of tool, stand on the ground, never use a ladder, always keep the blade sharp, keep your oil filled, and wear goggles. To keep your pruners clean, most pros are just recommending soapy water and a scrub brush or steel wool, although one expert, he said he loves scrubbing bubbles and a wire brush.
Interesting.
Once your jaws are clean, you're going to dry them off, and you can use a small file and sharpen the cutting edge. So if you have a bypass pruner, you're only sharpening the outside beveled edge of the cutting blade. You're going to use just moderate pressure, work down the edge. You're going to use the same angle or follow the same angle that was set by the manufacturer. And you don't want to sharpen the other side that slides against the bottom of the unsharpened blade because you don't want to create space between the blades.
Okay.
And if you happen to have burrs or nicks, you just want to take a flat file and smooth that out. You never want to use anything too aggressive like a belt sander because it's going to remove too much material. For an Anvil-style pruner, you're going to file both sides of the cutting blade following the angle of the bevel and just remove enough metal to make it sharp. In a pruner that comes apart, it's going to be much easier to sharpen. Once your blades are sharp, you're going to use an oil like a WD-40 to lubricate the blades and protect against rust. And then you can add a couple of drops of an oil like a 3-in-1 oil in the pivot point and wipe off the excess.
Is there a best time to prune?
So for most plants, pruning in the winter or before any spring growth while the plant is dormant is the least stressful on plants. Usually encourages new growth in spring, and it prevents infections or insect problems. But if you have dead, damaged, or diseased branches, you should be pruning that anytime during the year. And many of the pros that I was reading, they're saying that trimming off dead tree branches actually is the healthiest in the summer.
Interesting.
If you have flowering plants, gardeners recommend pruning after the plant's finished its blooming later in that spring. That way you're going to get the most flowers that season. And they recommend not to prune too late in fall for most plants because it can stimulate growth rather than allowing the plant to thicken up its cell walls and get ready for winter. And with most plants, you never want to prune more than 1/3 of the plant in any one season. For shrubs or plants in landscape areas, they say it's better to lightly prune and shape it every year. That way, if it gets too big in an area, you don't have to be too aggressive with your pruning. For young trees, you want to remove any branches that grow at a narrow angle to the main trunk, less than 45-degree angle if you're in an area where it snows, because they're going to be weak, and if they break off, it can tear the bark, causing infection and disease. You want to remove any branches that grow inward or rub against other branches. Remove branches that grow down. Remove low-growing branches that's going to interfere with mowing or maintenance, and you want to do that before they get too big. And then remove any branches close to gutters or the roof of your home. You want to remove shoots from the ground or coming off the base of the tree. And then when a tree is older, if you have to remove larger branches, you want to do it in sections toward the main trunk for safety, and that way you're going to prevent damage to the tree. Because the problem cutting a large branch is the weight of that can sometimes create like a hinge or a flap and tear away a section of the tree or the trunk.
Right.
So as you're cutting through, you don't cut all the way through fast enough, and the weight just tears a hunk out, so you can get infection or disease. To prevent that, you can create a jump cut. So you'd use a pole saw and cut a notch on the underside of the branch a few inches away from the area where you're going to make your final cut. Your second cut, you're going to be removing a whole section of the branch just before that jump cut, so you're taking the weight off of the branch.
Okay.
If that part of the branch started to tear away and create that hinge, when it reaches that jump cut, it just falls away. It's not going to go into the main trunk. And then your last cut, now you can cut and take your time and get a nice cut close to the trunk, and there's not going to be that weight that you're worrying about. For rose bushes, pruning is going to help create either bigger flowers or more of them. If you cut back aggressively, you tend to get bigger flowers but less. And if you prune lightly, you get smaller flowers but more of them.
Interesting.
That's weird, huh? You want to prune any dead wood back to green bark, and then prune the center of a rose bush. Gardeners say that air circulation is going to give you a healthier plant, and like most plants, you can prune up to a third of it without killing it. For hedges, the shape is going to affect its health.
Really?
So the best shape is like a plateau, like Devil's Tower, where it's...
Or a lamp shape.
So it's wider on the bottom and more narrow on the top. So
Like a lamp shape.
Yeah, kind of an A shape. Or like a hill, like a...
Half moon, semicircle.
Right, exactly. So that shape, that where it's narrow...
You have some nice drawings here, by the way.
Narrow on the top and wide on the bottom. A bad shape would be...
An upside down lampshade.
Okay, that's the best I can say. Some top-rated pruners with hand pruners: Felco, Corona, Dram, D-R-A-M-M, Fiskars, A-R-S, and Baco, B-A-H-C-O. For pole pruners: Fiskars, Jameson, Gilmore, and Corona. And for cordless tree pruners, or cordless or corded, Greenworks, Works, W-O-R-X, Sun Joe, and Black & Decker. And for hedge shears, ARS, Corona, and Baco.
Do you have anything else to add?
You want to keep your pruners sharp, clean and oil them after every use. A bypass pruner is probably going to be the most versatile if you're only buying one tool for small plants. And it's going to cut branches 1/2 to 3/4, but look at the label. And you want to match the pruner to the job, so the size of the branch. Pruners that come apart are going to be easier to maintain, and pruners that have an adjustable nut at the pivot point, it's going to allow you to have that perfect space between the blades for ease of use and for clean cuts.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, the Google Play Music app, and iHeartRadio.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.
Thank you.